Welcome back, sir.
Yeah, thanks, Professor Jain.
Yeah, hello. So, yes, the participants are already there.
Okay,
So, they are waiting right now. So, we could
okay,
resume
sure,
the session. Yeah.
sure. We can start. Okay, let me share my screen. Okay, you can all see my screen, right?
Yes.
Okay. So here's a brief summary of the things we discussed in the last session. Uh, so one message is that the pre-built knowledge graphs like DBpedia or other things, they can work for many applications. For any application that you are planning to build or any problem you are trying to solve, identify the requirements that you have before starting working on the solution so that you know these are the constraints I want to satisfy. And based on that, there are many publicly available graphs that might be of use to you. So you may not have to start working from the scratch. Now, if you are working on a specific domain, then you may have to write your own, like build your own graphs if you are not able to find anything. And that is obviously a more challenging task. But again, it's a matter of trade-off between time and accuracy. How much time do you want to spend, and how much accuracy you want to have your system to be. So those are the things you would have to consider. Uh, in domain-specific applications, even creating a simple schema may require you to work with some domain experts. Like if you want to have something for medical domain, you may have to work with doctors, nurses to get their domain expertise. And any type of graphs that you create, it will have certain issues. It will have limited relationship types or some issues in extracting the knowledge. So all those issues are there. So don't worry about them. No matter who the person is, which organization is building the graph, there are always going to be certain issues. So let us now see, let's say if you have to create a graph on your own, then what is the typical process and what are the typical issues people encounter? So a lot of these slides, a lot of these slides and the material in this session, it is not actually, so it is actually based on what I have experienced and some of my experiences. It is not something you would find discussed a lot in papers. I mean, a lot of it seems intuitive, but somehow when I read papers, I find that, they overstate their claims or ignore a lot of practical issues, which specifically when you start working on these applications, and uh, if you have not encountered these simple problems before, then a lot of time I have seen that students and people, they are discouraged, or it's more like a shock to them that, oh, we read this huge really popular deep learning paper and somehow we are not getting the results that we wanted. So these slides will be very less theoretical or something. It's just to illustrate the type of issues people might face and some of my experience. So let us say we have to create our own knowledge base, and let us consider we did not find any knowledge base. So right now we want to have this entity extraction part on our own. So let's consider this simple example, this one single sentence, which is two sentences. Sorry. So these sentences are: Jonathan Watson works at IBM. He has more than 50 patents and won Best Inventor Award for his invention, Neural Chip by John Watson et al. So this is a sentence, and in this sentence, the entities are this person and the organization IBM. So typically what we want is that our entity extractor to extract and identify and extract these entities: Jonathan Watson, IBM, and John Watson. And it should also tell us that there is some kind of relationship between Jonathan Watson at IBM. So you see the brown boxes and the arcs connecting them. So typically the pipeline of creating a knowledge graph consists of these three high level steps. So in first level, which is entity extraction, you use named entity recognition systems or your custom entity taggers to identify the entities in the text and extract them. So in an entity extraction module, if we pass in the above sentence, these are the entities that the system will identify. So the entities will be Jonathan Watson, IBM, and John Watson. Then the second step is identifying relation. So relation extraction module. So what this relation module gives you is it gives you this relationship that Jonathan Watson and IBM Watson, they are involved in a relationship known as employed boy. So note here that in this particular example, the entity called John Watson, which is highlighted in red. For this, the system was not able to identify any relationship. Note at this step, the system does not know that Jonathan Watson and John Watson, they are the same person. For the system's point of view, Jonathan Watson and John Watson are two entities, and the system only figured out that Jonathan Watson and IBM are related by this employed by relationship. So for John Watson, no entity relationship, sorry, for John Watson, no relationship was identified. So it is more like a dangling entity at this point of time. Now, after you have done entity extraction and relation extraction, there is this generic noise reduction phase. So in this noise reduction, you use a lot of rules, a lot of heuristics, and a lot of domain level information to correct all the errors that you could observe in those knowledge graphs. So we have seen errors, we have seen discussion, like we have discussed what type of errors or issues could be there in the graph. So there could be incorrect knowledge, there could be incomplete knowledge, there could be inconsistent knowledge, right? So all those type of things you correct for them in this specific phase. So there was this question about, what if you have different values for a simple triple? Let's say the country and the population example that we had discussed. So if you had multiple triples with multiple values, uh, then in this phase, noise reduction phase, you can decide what do you want to do with all these triples. So depending on your application, you can say that I will only keep the most recent uh, value of the triple because my application wants up-to-date knowledge. So in this noise reduction phase, you can discard all the old values. Or if you say that, in my application, I need to be aware of all the information, but I want to have some confidence associated with different triples. So in this noise reduction phase, you will take care of that value. There are many other issues that you could correct in this noise reduction phase. For example, in this specific case, remember that John Watson and Jonathan Watson, they are considered as two different entities. So in this noise reduction phase, you could also tell the system that Jonathan Watson and John Watson, they are the one and the same entity. So it's just the two names of the same person, same entity. So then the system knows that, okay, so from this input text, I only encountered one entity and one relation, two entities, John Watson, this person, and IBM, the company, and one relationship between them. Jonathan Watson and John Watson, they are just synonyms. So the system now knows this information. So that's how you are removing these dangling entities which had no other relationship involved. So that's how you use noise reduction after entity and relation extraction. So this is the phase where you can incorporate lot of rules, lot of heuristics, and lot of domain specific information, and introduce a lot of application specific constraints. After this noise reduction, your knowledge graph will have less noise, but not zero noise. It will still have some errors, it will still have some noise, and that is perfectly okay. You can never have 100% accurate system. As long as you have a reasonably good system, you are good to go in your application. So once you have done that, you have your KG in place. So this is a high level introduction of how a typical knowledge graph construction pipeline works in practice. Now, so we looked at this example, which is a very open domain example, but let's say if you have a very domain specific example. So this sentence is basically an extract from a medical paper. So here you see that the entities, they are very, very different. So entities in your medical application, they could be medicines, they could be diseases, they could be genes, they could be chemicals, they could be symptoms of diseases. So all these type of things could be there in your medical application. Now, a typical open domain entity extraction systems, they are not trained to recognize these type of entities. So now you'll have to write your own domain specific entity extractors, and it's an open area, right? Depending on your application, you will have to come up with what are the properties of my domain, what are the rules and heuristics I could devise, and based on that, you have to write your own entity extractor systems. Typically, it's a supervised classification problem where each input word has to be mapped into one of the known entity classes, or you just say that it's not an entity. So for medical domain, you will use medical heuristics. For example, let's say uh, chemical names will have alpha, beta, gamma. So any word which has alpha, beta, gamma, that is with a high probability, it's the name of a chemical. So it's just an example, but depending on your domain expertise, you could come up with a lot of features, lot of values. So that's how a typical entity extraction pipeline for your domain specific applications will look like. So in this case, I have shown that type 2 diabetes highlighted in yellow has the symptom blood in urine last line. And other entities could be, or other symptoms could be intermittent flank pain, blood pressure, chronic back pain. So these are diseases and symptoms. So how do you identify these things? You have to write your own custom entity and relationship extractors, and that requires a lot of domain specific information. So let us now take a pause and go to a different uh, screen. Just a minute. Let me switch my screen. You can see my Chrome now, right? So do you
Yes.
so can you see this OpenIE tab? OpenIE.
Yes.
Okay. So so now we have an overview of how the a typical high-level pipeline for information extraction and KG construction looks like. Now I want to give an overview of this toolkit called Core NLP. It's from the research group at Stanford. So this is the group where Andrew Ng, Percy Liang, Chris Manning, these are all members of this group. So these are all great names in natural language processing and deep learning. So a lot of the papers on information extraction, they have been implemented as part of this core NLP toolkit. So this core NLP toolkit, it has a lot of applications and lot of functionalities. So it has your custom annotator. So you can write custom annotators for your domain specific applications. You can use tokenization. You can use splitting of sentences. You can do part of speech tagging. You can do named entity recognition. So there are some pre-trained models that are shipped with the library, which is useful for open domain applications. You can use parsing, co-references, OpenIE, knowledge-based population, entity linking. So a lot of the deep learning models that are NLP models that come from the Stanford's NLP group, they make it available via this core NLP toolkit. So it's a really useful toolkit. You can use it for writing your own knowledge graph creation construction pipelines, and it's a good toolkit in practice. I mean, it works reasonably well, and I'll show some examples to also illustrate like what it is working, how does the output look like, and what are the cases where it does not work. So in terms of the language, this is written in Java. So in this website, you can easily Google Stanford Core NLP, and it will take you to this website. So you will see that it is you can use the command line. Like these are the different commands that you can use. So these are, if you directly have your data in some predefined format and you directly want the output, you can use it. But the most important thing is these Java-based APIs. So it's all in Java. And this is what I have been using a lot. And this is something very similar to what we used to use at IBM. I mean, it was not exactly this toolkit, but it was an internal toolkit within IBM, which is not public, but it's very similar in functionality and principle to this. A lot of functionalities are similar. Maybe we are using some of the same models, but it's all written by IBM developers. But that's also in Java, and most of my coding is also in Java. So Professor Jain initially asked about the software stack. So it's very simple. It's not very complicated or very fancy. Most of the applications that I write or most of the applications that our team writes is in Java, because that actually helps us to integrate our research systems or our experimental stuff with a lot of products that our companies have. A lot of these product development happens in Java. So we prefer to write all these things in Java, because a lot of support for debugging, for logging, and for all these enterprise applications is in Java. Python is also used, but that is more for experimentation and exploration. So you could try simple software or simple stuff, things to do in Python. A lot of researchers, they also made their code available via Python in form of notebooks. But when it comes to software quality, robustness, testing, all those things, and the whole infrastructure, I think Java still is the winner. So mostly in the companies we use Java for all the enterprise pipelines, and it is relatively simple. So actually in this documentation for each of these functionality, annotators, sentence splitting, they have an example, this OpenIE demo class, where they show how you can write your own code to process your text. So I think that's where it is starting. I mean, I'll not go into the details of the code. This is something available and you can easily go over it, but it's relatively easy to use. Basically, you just have to create a new annotation, right? You have this text. So here it is a simple string. You can have all the text of your document in a single string variable and pass it to this new annotation pipeline. So once you can do that, you can just call different methods of the API as they are showing. For example, you can use this pipeline.annotate, so it will does the annotation. You have this document ready, so you can use all these sentence splitters, so document that get sentences, so it gets the individual sentences. You can then iterate over each individual sentence. Then for this sentence, you can get natural logic annotations, which is basically the OpenAI class. So all these things you can easily do. So they have a lot of other methods for sentiment analysis, entity linking, and other stuffs too. So this is a good tool to know and use. I have used it a lot. So and it is very well supported in terms of documentation, and a lot of very good trained models that the Stanford group often comes up with. They update the library with those models, so you get state-of-the-art technology, state-of-the-art models, and you can use this library to apply it in your pipeline. So now let us look at how this uh, 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 library actually works in practice. So here's the demo that this group have on their website, just to try in a visual way. So you can see this new window, right? Core NLP, and there is a text to annotate box. If this thing is visible, right?
Yeah, this is visible.
Oh, okay. Thank you. I was just waiting for the confirmation. Okay. So let us try with a very, very simple sentence. So let us say Sumit is a researcher at Adobe. So this is a very simple sentence, and the different type of annotations that I was showing in the API. So you can easily access there. So you can do part of speech tagging, you can do named entities, and all the other things. So the thing that is of interest to us is these named entities. So let us see once we select these named entities. So now this sentence will be passed to the API and named entity recognition will be performed. So let us see what is the output. So this is the output of this core NLP toolkit. Notice that this is a very, very simple sentence. Sumit is a researcher at Adobe, and this is the output. So it is showing that the toolkit was able to correctly identify Sumit is the name of a person. So Sumit is an entity of type person. Very good. It also figured out that researcher is an entity of type title. So researcher is a title. But notice that this toolkit was not able to figure out that Adobe is an organization or a company. So the system failed here on this very, very simple sentence. So this is kind of surprising. I mean, if you read the papers, you will figure out that, this is a very simple thing. System should be able to handle it. People talk about larger sentences, very long sentences, multi-clause sentences, and they claim that this is what their systems can handle. But in practice, this is a very simple sentence and the system was not able to figure out. Now let us modify the sentence a little bit. So you see Sumit works at Adobe. Now let us see if it is able to figure it out. So again, it can figure out that Sumit is a person, but it is still not able to figure out Adobe. So, okay. So now let's just make a very simple change. I added this thing. Sumit works at Adobe Inc. Okay. Now let me run this tool again. So now surprisingly, you added that additional information and now the system is able to figure out that Sumit is a person as well as Adobe Inc. is also an organization. So why did that happen? I mean, it looks really different. It looks really weird, right? So actually I was thinking about it and again, uh, let us think from from a human's point of view, right? When we read a sentence, how do we try to figure out something? So if we just look at this sentence, Sumit works at Adobe. So when you and I will read this sentence, we'll figure out that, Sumit is name of a person, like Yuki, he is working somewhere, right? So this is what the library is also able to figure out, that Sumit is a person. But also when you and I read this sentence, we'll figure out that, okay, Sumit works at, so whatever the next word is, it must be the name of his company or the organization, right? This is the common sense. So even though if you have not heard the name of this company, you would still figure out that Adobe is the name of the company where this person is working. But somehow the system was not able to figure this out. Now, supposedly, this is an NLP system trained on huge amounts of text, a deep learning neural model. It should be able to figure it out, but somehow it is not able to do that. The exact reason we don't know. And that is the main issue of explainability and interpretability of deep learning systems. I mean, if it was, let's say, a rule-based system, something like XYZ works at ABC, whenever you see a pattern, ABC has to be a company name. That system will always figure out that Adobe is the name of a company. But in deep learning, the system, the neural network has learned certain patterns, and somehow this thing is not captured. We can always make an educated guess, but we cannot be 100% sure why it is not making this thing. So that's an issue. Now, the second thing is, if you notice that as soon as I entered this INC, which is incorporated, so it means that now the system was able to successfully figure this out. So again, we are not 100% sure. We cannot be 100% sure why, what change in the sentence, because if you see the linguistic structure of the sentence remains the same. ABC works at XYZ. So it's the same thing. But somehow now adding this INC has enabled the system to figure out that Adobe Inc. is an organization. So my guess is that in lot of American companies, they have INC in their name. Adobe Incorporated, INC, Google Incorporated, just like we have limited companies in India, right? LIC Private Limited, ABC Private Limited. So INC is associated with a lot of company names in US. So my guess is that the neural network has seen during its training that most of the organizations that were shown to it during training, they had INC in its name. So when the system sees this Adobe INC, then because of just that signal, the system is able to figure out that Adobe is a company name. So I think that's a potential issue, because even though right now you have figured out correct, but what will happen is that when you have your data, let's say coming from some reports or some documents, it cannot always be guaranteed that all the data will contain very good, well-defined information. In like, we can always say that, there might be someone who has just written exactly like this, so the system will be able to figure out. Someone might have written just Adobe tag, Adobe, that's it. Then the system will fail. Many people write Adobe at Adobe systems as well. So let's see what happens next. So Adobe system, it is also able to figure out, but Adobe, it is not. So again, you cannot guarantee what will be in your data. So what will happen is that you will have the data containing the information, but still the information extraction system will make certain kinds of errors. And that's how the noise and errors creep up into your knowledge graphs when you are doing these automated information extraction systems. Now, let us look at some further examples. So let me actually let us just try this thing. Sumit, let's say, teaches at IIIT. So if I use this, then again, it is person and it fails to recognize IIIT. Now let us see IIIT Delhi. So what will happen? Now, again, you see, this has figured out that Delhi is a city, which is correct, and IIIT is a location, which is incorrect, right? It is not a location, it is an organization. And actually, people will say that IIIT Delhi is actually the complete name of an organization. So if we see IIIT Delhi, right? So now it is again not able to do that. But if you see, all these are valid sentences, or these are valid ways where someone can denote the same fact that I'm teaching at IIIT Delhi. So depending on a way the person is writing the text or the information is there, the system might be able to figure out something and it might be able to lose out on many things. So that is one typical errors that you will have to encounter, right? They will happen no matter what any paper claims that, we achieve 80% accuracy, we achieve 90% accuracy. That is not true. That only happens on the training set and test set. But in reality, these are very, very, very simple sentences. NLP is supposedly using a neural model, which is trained on huge amounts of data, and it is still not able to do that. Another problem here is that if we go back to the previous thing, Sumit works at Adobe. So, Adobe Systems. So we see that Adobe Systems is an organization. And if in other document it was written, Sumit works at Adobe Inc., and Adobe Inc. is an organization. Now what will happen is that you will have, so let us say this was the thing was in your data. You had two different documents. In one document, you found this relationship, Sumit works at Adobe System. And second, you found this information, Sumit works at Adobe Inc. So now if I ask you a question, not you, but let's say I ask this computer a question, where does Sumit work at? So the computer now has two choices, Adobe Systems or Adobe Inc. Now in this case, the computer has no way to figure out whether Adobe Systems and Adobe Inc., these two things are the same entity or not, right? So this is a second problem, this co-reference resolution. How do you figure out that the two entities that have been extracted, they are in fact the same entity, so that you don't create these spurious duplicate nodes, right? So this is again like a lot of practical issues that you have to deal with. So okay, so any questions, any concerns so far? Okay. Yeah, was there a question or?
Yeah, not a question exactly. I
Okay.
can see a question.
Yes. So इसके लिए chat box I should look at.
I think we can move on in the chat box also. I couldn't see any question for the session. Sir, if you are there, we couldn't hear you. Maybe you need to rejoin. Hello.
Hi, I'm
Hello.
back. Sorry, hi, sorry. I
Yeah.
think my yeah, the light went, so the Wi-Fi
Okay.
stopped for a minute. Sorry about that.
By mistake, I think I have stopped your video.
Oh, okay.
There was somebody
Uh,
else who switched on the video. So just check if you could start your video
yeah,
yourself. Yeah. Okay.
yeah, I did that. Okay. So, so sorry about that thing. The light went off and I had the Wi-Fi turned on. So, okay, so let me start with this. So let's look at Adobe Ink. Okay, so we looked at the entities and now let us look at the relation part. So let's use this relation thing and let's see what this system is giving us. So in the entity part, we have seen previously that Sumit is works at Adobe Ink. This thing the system could figure out. So on entity part, we are fine. Now note that this relation part. So the output says KBP relation. So KBP means knowledge based population task. So that was a task for that had provided some data, and this NLP toolkit uses models trained on that data. So that's the meaning of KBP here. It's just simple relations. So the relation type of relationships, it comes from the data that was shared by this KBP task. So if you see in this thing, the relation part, it has told you that Sumit is an entity, and from your entity part, you know that Sumit is a person. So you've identified that Sumit is an entity of type person. Then it is telling you that Adobe Inc. is again an entity, which you know that is a type of organization. And then this is the relationship, employee or member of. So this is your triple right away. Sumit, an entity of type person, is an employee or member of Adobe, which is an entity of type organization. So if you use this toolkit and you use these two features, you can have your entity and relation triples. So if you run it on a large number of sentences, you will have a large number of triples extracted, whatever the system is able to identify, and that gives you your own knowledge graph in the form of triples. So that's the expectation. But as I had shown, there will be a lot of errors here, right? Because there will be some things that the system will miss. There will be something that the system will not correctly identify. There will be things where the system will make certain errors. But the whole pipeline is here. You can use this core NLP toolkit. You can use NER system. You can use this relation thing, and you have your triples there. Now let us look at some more potential issues that you encounter. You have the basic recipe, but how do you use that? Like how do you so different people like given the same recipe, they will make the same dish, but the taste will be very different, right? So it's the same thing happens here. Different people who use the same toolkit, they'll have the same resources, but how they address those errors, those issues, that is where the whole difference in quality will come, because there you'll have to analyze the output, analyze the data, and use some ingenuity to correct for those errors, and that would lead to a better quality graph. So that would depend on the person's experience and also their observational power. So let us make this input text a little bit more complicated. So Sumit works at Adobe and he also teaches at Triple IT. Let's just do this. So, and here we will also add one more thing, which is known as co-reference. So what co-reference does is, it basically tries to figure out that this he, is he corresponding to Sumit or is he some different person? So this is the role of co-reference here. So now let us look at the output of these three components here. So the first is named entity recognition. So in first sentence, the NIR system figure out that Sumit is a person, Adobe is an organization. So far, so good. It did not figure out that he is an entity, which is okay because he is a pronoun, and triple IT is an entity, but it was always missing. So that is a known issue with us. Then speaker part we can ignore for the moment. Let's focus on the co-reference part. So in the co-reference part, note here that Sumit works at Adobe. So this is given an ID of coref entity 3. And in the next sentence, he also teaches at Triple IT. That is given this coref entity 3, the same ID. So this is basically telling you that this he here actually corresponds to the same person, Sumit. So if your system was able to figure out that Triple IT is also an entity or there is a relationship, then for Sumit, you could have two triples. First is employee of Adobe, and second would have been, let's say, teacher or faculty at Triple IT or whatever the relation could have been. But since in the second sentence, the system fails to even identify the relationship, we cannot utilize this, but at least it is telling you that Sumit and he here corresponds to the same entity in the graph. So, so that's the co-reference part here. Now, let us try to see if we can modify the sentence a little bit. We also work at triple IT, and let's see what happens. I basically want to illustrate the type of triples. Okay, so triple IT is not able to identify, but let's try this. Okay, so Google it figured out. Again, if you see Google figured out, Adobe not, again, no explanation how that happened. But anyways, so now you, so now it, now, but we have something to explain what I wanted to convey. So these are the relationships that you could identify, that he is an entity, which is an employee of Google. So now if you add this triple to your knowledge graph, he employee of Google, it is not very useful. But by using core reference alongside this thing, you can say that Sumit works at Adobe. And then from again, Sumit itself, you can create another edge to Google saying Sumit also works at Google. So that's how you account for these pronouns and other variable names for a person or for an entity when you are creating the knowledge graph. So again, it's a very simple examples. Another thing to note here is that these two are very simple examples, and we see here that even with these simple examples, you cannot get a perfect graph, right? So all the papers, all the people that claim that this is a system which achieve 80% or state of the art accuracy, uh, always take that with a pinch of salt, right? Because how that works in practice, and most importantly for your application and for your use case, that is the most important part. And there is no technique, no toolkit available that can give you what you want in one go. What you have to do is you have to take what is a reasonable quality toolkit. Core NLP is fairly good. It is very well. This is often the first thing I start with. You apply it to your data. Then you see what are the type of issues you are facing, and what are the issues that are more critical for you, and what are the issues you can live with and you can ignore. The issues that are critical to you, you try to correct them. You try to come up with heuristics for them and iteratively refine them, right? So one thing which I had tried was that I first applied co-reference resolution like this. First of all, I apply the co-reference resolution. So now I know Sumit and he corresponds to same thing. Then what I will do is that I would update my input text with the name of the entity. So Sumit works at Adobe. Sumit also works at Google. And then you do relation part here. So now you directly get the clean triples. So Sumit works at Adobe. Sumit works at Google. So now you can directly add it to your knowledge graph. So this is again one trick that I had applied. First run co-reference resolution, clean the data a little bit, and then apply relationship. So this is something I worked in practice, and it worked really well. It's a very simple trick. You will not find it like new papers about it, but this is something that works in practice. So yeah, so the only key message that I want you to take away is that don't just blindly rely or trust on some software toolkits or some big professor's paper that this is what that will happen. Those things are good. They actually solve a lot of things, but what ultimately works is how those things are working for your data, what are the issues, and how you account for your issues. That is what will give you the maximum advantage rather than worrying about which is the best single toolkit I should use. This is one thing I observed with students as well. Like they are always focused on, sir, this is the new deep learning method. Let me try this. Or this is the 2012 paper. This is the 2013 paper. Which one I should use? My guess is take whatever which is easier to implement, which is for which the code and documentation is available. Take that and incrementally add steps on top of it to have a well-defined clean data. So this is for some open domain stuff. Now let us try some medical domain data. So this is actually a very recent medical paper. It was just published, I think, yesterday or 2-3 days ago. This is the paper from Bharat Biotech people on, it's basically the third phase trial data of Covaxin. So I just copied this first uh, sentence from this paper, and let us try to run co-reference relations and named entities here. And let us see what we can get. So yeah, so practically not much. So let us look at the sentence. We report the clinical efficacy against COVID-19 infection of BBV152, a whole virion inactivated SARS-CoV-2 vaccine formulated with a toll-like receptor 78 against molecule adsorbed to alum algyl ion DG. So if you see here in this specific sentence, there are many important entities. So first is COVID-19, then this BBV152, which is the variant of the virus, SARS-CoV-2, uh, receptor 7/8, which is a noun in medicines, Adam is again a name, and algal IMDG. So these are all the entities. Now let us see what the name entity recognition system has found. It has found none of those things. What it has found is it has found this number 19 and said that, okay, it is a number, but this is not very useful. I mean, you don't need a neural system to tell you that 19 is a number. It's a simple regular expression, but if it is a digit, then it is a number, right? Then it has correctly figured out that infection is a cause of death, which is very extreme because in this whole sentence, infection is not used as a cause of death. Infection is basically a disease or a symptom here, but it has incorrectly figured out that it is a cause of death. There is no discussion about death here. It has missed out on this BBV152, SARS-CoV-2, and anything else. What it has done is essentially any digit that it has found, it has said that it is a number and infection incorrectly identified as cause of death. So you see that on domain specific data, these typical NER system don't work well because they have not been trained on it. The same thing holds true for relations. No relation whatsoever was found. No co-reference was found. So practically for your data, the whole thing is not very useful. Now let me try and increase the sentence. So let us say let's just take, where is the sentence ending? Here. So let's add some additional paragraph here, and let us see what do we get. Okay, so probably we fed in a lot more data. Let's see if it is able to work on it or not. Timed out. The document is too long. Okay, so let us try to. So this is another issue, especially in academic literature, where the sentences are very, very long. So this whole thing, we did a double-blind randomized. Okay, so यहाँ से it is starting a new sentence. So let me just see if now it can do it. Okay, so this was still okay. So here's another issue, right? For many in different domains, even this simple thing that the data is very, very long, that can also cause the system to fail. And this is actually true in academic data. This is important in when you are doing legal document analysis, the analysis of courtroom documents, analysis of RBI's guidelines. So these are all the things that people have tried. So in those things, you might have noticed that in government documents, the language is very different. It is very verbose. So the sentences are very long. So typical NER systems, they actually fail because they are not able to handle such long sentences. Likewise, if you are doing analysis of patent documents, the same issue comes up again and again. So how do you correct for them? No correct answer. You come up with certain rules based on your domain knowledge, based on input from your clients, and you try to take it case by case. So again, we see that the only thing it is able to find out is numbers. Okay, Indian is a nationality, which is good. Age 18 to 19 years, it is a duration, numbers, and time. So at least 14 days after the second dose, right? So again, I won't say that these are very useful, and these are not even correct as well, right? Because at least 14 days after the second dose. So what it has figured out is that right from the current timestamp, 19/7. So I think this is their system timestamp or something. So from this time, okay, so got it. So 14 days from the second dose. So it has taken current time to be the current date and then added 14 days on top of it. So today is 5 July. So 14 becomes 19 July. So this system, what has done is it has said that this basically corresponds to 19th July, which is kind of, you can say, interesting. It's kind of, it is trying to be intelligent, but it is not useful in this context. So these are all the errors you'll have to deal with. and it is actually missing out on a lot of interesting things such as BBV52, this LM name, COVID-19, all these things. So these are all the things that it has missed out on. And okay, so co-reference it could do okay. It could say that the clinical efficacy against COVID-19 and this efficacy corresponds to the same thing, which is kind of okay. V here is also okay because V here corresponds to the authors, but in this sentence, V is the single reference that is being made, so it's not very impressive. So, and no relationships were found. So the key point is that, here we see that a lot of things that you would like to observe from your medical data, they are missed here. So what to do then? Well, again, no correct answer. You would have to write and you would have to spend some time with your domain experts. You would have to understand what are the key characteristics of things in this specific domain. And from there, you have to figure out, okay, how can I capture this information? For example, they may tell you that, many diseases names, they are all capitalized. And a lot of these things are something like, let's say, some capital letters followed by a series of numbers, right? So they can tell you that this is a nomenclature convention in our domain. So then you can write a parser that would identify all such strings, right? And can tell you that, this is a potential entity. So you would have to write schemes like this. So it's all domain specific. So, and okay, so yeah, so this is what I wanted to illustrate. The key message was that, even though state of the art tools are available, don't just blindly trust them. They may be totally useless for your application, or even if they work reasonably well for your data, there might still be lot of issues which you'll have to correct anyways. That would require a careful analysis of the data and your interactions with your domain experts. So, and as you see with this Adobe Ink and Adobe example, it is, you can always make some kinds of guesses, but you can never be sure that whether or why the system is producing the output it used. For example, Adobe, it could not figure out. Google, it could figure out. Why, we don't know. We can only make certain guesses. So that's the notion of explainability and interpretability that is often talked about. So yes, so this is what I wanted to share with respect to the practical implementation issues. Any questions, any comments till now before we move on to the slides again? Or was this all expected that, yes, this is what we were expecting, this is what we have seen? Or if you have similar experience you want to share, I would be happy to hear that also. Okay. Okay, so there's this question from Rabindra Kumar. So the question is, will it be better to take the fragments of a long sentence in adapted way to construct the knowledge graph? I would say yes, in general, but again, it could depend on the application or it could depend on the type of sentence as well. So, for example, in RBI documents that I have looked at, so what happens is that they use semicolons to indicate different clauses. So then it makes sense to split the whole long sentence into multiple clauses at semicolons, because there is some kind of independence there, because clause A is independent of clause B. So there you can use this. And in general, I could also say that, depending on the domain and their writing conventions, you could figure out certain rules to figure out what could be a good way to take the fragment of a sentence. So that could certainly is a it's a doable thing, but it would not always be the correct thing. We'll have to see. For example, uh, I mean, I'm just trying to see if I can explain it with the help of an example here. Uh, I mean, like, let's say if you come up with the rule again, let's say you split at comma, then that might not be a good way to fragment the sentence, right? So I think fragmenting is a good idea, but you'll also have to figure out what is the criteria for fragmenting a long sentence. Where should you split the sentence? Where should you take the fragment? Should you randomly split it at some place, or should you try at equal parts of a sentence? That may not always be the correct way, because then it may happen that you have broken down the sentence into uh, like you've broken down the continuity. So that hampers the understanding of the sentence. So if there are certain domain specific properties that you could utilize, then I think it is certainly useful to take the fragments of a long sentence. Any other question? Okay, so I think we can proceed then. Let me start sharing my screen now, the slides. Okay, so okay, so let's go back to the slides now after the demo. Okay, so I shared some of the like a demo of the core NLP and how you can use it. So now let me share my experience of creating a knowledge graph when I was at IBM using similar tools and similar APIs. We didn't exactly use core NLP for that work. We were using an IBM modified version, but that will tell you that uh, the things that I have just illustrated with the help of an example, they were very similar to how we faced it and how we corrected it. So let's have a look. So actually, so our aim in that project was basically to work with different clients of IBM and take whatever data that they have, the signals of the world, as we used to call them, which is basically the data that they provide us, uh, create a knowledge graph out of that data. And once you have that knowledge graph, then you could build a lot of applications on top of it, or apps. So some of the apps that we tried was, so let's say if you were working with some medical company, and so some of the apps that you could build a knowledge graph is, some basic search or retrieval based app. So what is TP53? So TP53 is nothing but a tumor protein. So you get the entity TP53 and show its different properties. Or who are the top players of Delhi Daredevils, right? So you get Delhi Daredevils and use the people or player or member or employee relationship to answer who are the top players of Delhi Daredevils, right? So these type of applications you could build, like search based applications, question answering based applications. Then you could also do a lot of similarity based stuff here, which we used to call as our discovery stuff. So what are the genes that are most similar to TP53? So this is essentially an application of your entity similarity. So in papers, you will see entity similarity, entity relatedness, or node similarity kind of things. So once you have created the graph, what you can do is you can apply neural networks on top of it to learn embeddings of individual nodes, right? You can apply any neural network or any method that you want. For example, let's say TransE, TransH, or nowadays, if you want, you can try GCNNs as well. So you will have the embeddings of your entities and your relationships. So when someone says, what are the genes most similar to TP53 gene? So now what you do is you go to the embedding space, you figure out this is the vector for TP53, and then these are the closest or the nearest vectors. And then you can easily answer this question. So again, it's the same graph. You have created it once, but then you can apply different techniques on top of it to answer search questions, to do retrieval, to do these discovery-based APIs, to do entity similarity, to do related entities. All those type of applications can be built. So how did we do that? So again, let us start with this example, right? So this is a set of sentences copied from Barack Obama's Wikipedia page. So this is the sentence. These are the sentences. Barack Hussein Obama too, born on this date, is an American politician who served as the 44th President of the United States from 2009 to 17. Obama was born in Honolulu, Hawaii, blah, 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 blah. So this is the sentence. So in this, the underlying words, they correspond to entities. So Barack Hussein Obama is an entity. Honolulu, Hawaii, he is an entity. Obama is an entity. Now you might have noticed these stars. So the star basically corresponds to co-references. Basically, what we want to say is that Barack Hussein Obama, the entities that are underlined and are denoted by these four words, they are same as the American politician. It's the same person being talked about. Likewise, in the next sentence, Obama star star, this is the same person being talked about as in the next sentence denoted by he. So this is your typical co-reference thing. So once we did the entity and relationship extractor, just directly running entity and relationship extractor, as we saw in the pipeline in the morning in the previous session, named entity extraction and relation extraction, and also in the core NLP demo, this is what we get. So we get an entity called Obama, which is of type person. It is this entity is born at this GPE, which is a geopolitical entity called Honolulu. Honolulu is located at Hawaii, and other things about Obama. So note here that we also have another entity called Barack Hussein Obama II, which is again of type person. He's the manager of United States. He's the part of many Americans, and so on and so forth. So this is the default option we get. Now note here that we know that Obama in the top part and Barack Hussein Obama in the bottom part, they are the same person, but they are represented as two separate nodes in the graph. So we have actually two subgraphs that correspond to Barack Hussein Obama. So if I asked a question, is Obama the manager of United States, or did Barack Hussein Obama was given a Nobel Prize, then my system will not be able to answer this question, because for my system, Barack Hussein Obama is a separate person and Obama is a separate person. And if you think from the system's point of view, Nobel Peace Prize is the one that was given to Obama, but not Barack Hussein Obama. So even though I have all the information, it is not present in the correct form. So what we need to do is we need to do this entity resolution. We need to tell the system that Obama and Barack Hussein Obama, they are nothing, but they are just the same people. So this is essentially your noise reduction phase in the pipeline we saw in the previous session. Now, in order to do that, you could use some, you could use different methods. What we did was a bunch of rules and heuristics. So our assumption was that, if in the same paragraph, we get two different entity names such that one entity's name is a superstring of the other entity name, then there is a good chance that they are the same entity. It may not always be true, but in most cases, it holds true, right? So New Delhi, Delhi, district of Ghaziabad, Ghaziabad, Barack Hussein Obama, Obama. So in most cases, this thing works well. So we use this heuristic and a lot of other features and simple rules to capture these things. So once you do that, the graph becomes very different visually. So this is before that correction, before that noise reduction, and this is after the noise reduction. So note the difference here, that now all these relationships, all these entities, they are now connected to Barack Obama. So now Nobel Peace Prize is also connected to Barack Obama. Manager of United States is also connected to Barack Obama. So the same information that you have, it is now present in a more enriched and a more useful form. So now the system will be able to make use of it in many more scenarios, in many more questions, in many more applications. So that is the whole point of noise reduction here. Now there is another important observation we made. So note here that right now this Hillary Clinton and primary campaign, this is like a dangling region of the graph. It is not connected to the major, this larger subgraph. Uh, so how do we correct that? And first of all, when we noticed it, we noticed that it is happening in many cases. We were getting many isolated subgraphs. So what does that mean? So for that, let us go back to this text itself and let us look at this sentence. So the sentence is, and after a close primary campaign against Hillary Clinton. So from this piece of text, the system could figure out that Hillary Clinton and primary campaign, they have some relationship. And also we could say that, Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama, they do have some relationship. Like if I give this piece of text to you to read and then ask, is there like, are Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton somewhat related? The answer will be yes, they are somewhat related. But what is the name of that relationship? What is the type of that relationship? That is not clear. I mean, typically in knowledge graphs, you capture relationships like brother, spouse, date of birth, employer, right? So there is no well-defined relationship between Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton that you could get from this text. So that's why, even though the system was able to identify Hillary Clinton as an entity, Barack Obama as an entity, but it was not able to establish a connection between them. So then we said that, okay, this is a valid observation and we don't have a well-defined relationship type, but let us use another heuristic. So in that heuristic, what we said is that we introduced a new relationship type called collocation. Collocation means that these two entities were present in our corpus and they were co-located with each other. That means they were very close to each other in the text. So that is telling us there is some type of relationship, but we don't know what is the relationship. So think of collocation as a miscellaneous kind of relationship where we don't know what's the exact name of the relationship. So after doing that, now we see that Hillary Clinton is now connected to Barack Obama with this relationship called collocation. So now the graph is even more enriched because now the system can even answer some vague questions that is Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton related? Most probably yes, they have a collocation relationship, right? So it's again, it's not a very like a concrete step that you always have to take. Some applications you may have to take it, some applications you may not even take it. It all depends on how you are designing your system and whether taking a specific decision helping your application or not. In our use cases, we wanted to have this information, so we use that. But it is not something you will find as a standard practice in papers or some documentation. And most things in construction of knowledge graphs and those things, they are like that only, right? A lot of things are data driven and observation driven. You do that based on your application and how it is impacting your end customers. So that's what we did. Now, to give you an idea of how these things actually impact the storage requirements, the RAM requirements. So what we used is we used Wikipedia and Factbook data to create our knowledge base. Now, in this knowledge base, we had about, in the input data that was created out of 5 million documents. So about 51 lakh documents were there. So in the first step, when we directly extracted entities and relationships, we were able to identify 176 million unique entities and 145 billion unique relationships. So note here that number of entities are much more than number of relationships. So that means that was happening because Barack Obama, Barack Hussein Obama, they were getting split, right? So after enrichment and correcting for those errors, the total number of unique entities came down to 22 million. So it is a reduction of a factor of almost 8, right? So from 176, you came down to 22 million. So because those nodes, Barack Obama, Barack Hussein Obama, they all got merged together. So now imagine the impact on your performance where you are dealing with a graph of 176 million nodes and a graph you are dealing with a size of 22 million nodes. It's huge because most of the graph algorithms, they are quadratic in time, right? Or at least linear in the number of nodes. So if you had reduced the number of entities by 8 times, your runtime synchros can reduce by 8 times. Or in terms of quadratic operations, it reduces by as much as 65 times. So an operation that will take 60 minutes, 60 seconds, that is 1 minute, you can now do it in 1 second. So it's huge performance gains by correcting for that noise. So noise reduction is not only in terms of precision, in terms of accuracy, it also has a very, very huge impact on your efficiency criteria, right? Which is something I have seen not discussed in many cases. Likewise, you see the number of relationships they have reduced from 145 to 52 million. And then after we did the expansion, the entities remain same because expansion does not affect the entities, but you do add some additional relationship. So our relationships are around 156 million. So this was the final statistics of the data that we were creating. And this approach, this seemingly very simple approach, some very simple heuristics, we were actually able to scale it to customers which had up to 100 million documents and 100 million entities and up to 5 billion relationships. So you can see that with careful observations and with careful engineering, with even very simple methods, very simple but logical methods, you could actually handle such huge amounts of data and could come up with applications that were actually found very useful by these customers. So this is the key message I wanted to convey, that the core NLP toolkit and the examples that I have discussed, they need not be very, very complex, very, very cutting edge state of the art. Even a reasonable method, when employed in a very, very logical, consistent, thoughtful manner, can give you great performance and great advantages. So this was the key message I wanted to convey, and the hands-on part. Uh, the core NLP toolkit, its Java APIs are available. I urge you to try it for your applications. It's open source. If you want to make any changes, that is also possible. If you have certain models and you want to contribute to the community and add to the models, that is also possible. So you should certainly have a look at it and try it, play with it, and use it in your projects. You'll find it very useful. So any questions, any comments till now before we go into the final few slides?
Dr. Sumit, thank you for this informative content. I have a question regarding the knowledge graph. Like if we have created a knowledge graph, suppose I have created an application and my knowledge graph is based for the query answering. So when I am querying like moon is this type of crop, it is giving the answer. It is giving the answer that it is because I have feeded there, and it is giving the answer that it is jazz type of crop. But Google is giving the answer pulse crop because it is a pulse. Because it is a pulse. So my question is like if I compare this result with Bing and Google, so can we this type of comparison in our result section that this is domain specific knowledge graph and it is restricted in nature, that is stored only agri specific data knowledge. So can we compare this result, search result with Bing and Google? It will be significant to show the result, that search result, the comparison of search result, and then the hit that if it gives the correct result 1 and 0, and then we can compare the precision and recall and F user. So it will it be significant to prepare this type of result?
We can, but my question would be that like a counter question here would be that someone might say is that you are comparing, but this comparison is not fair because your system is using different type of data and Google and Bing, they are using different type of data.
Exactly.
So what is the claim that you want to make? That would be my first question, right? What is the message that you want to convey?
I want to show that this domain-specific knowledge graph is giving the domain-specific data, but because this information is not available in the web documents of the Google and Bing, so
Right.
they are not giving. But
Right.
So I mean, Bing and Google are the big things. So my
Right.
question is this: that can we compare is this type of created own knowledge graph with the Google search results and Bing? Can we write this thing? Can we explain this thing? It will be significant that the search result is different.
Got it. So I think, yes, this is a valid comparison, but the way you present the results, the way you present it in your paper, on your reports, or whatever the end audience is, that has to convey this message. So you should not claim that our system has a better precision or a better recall than Google or Bing. What you should frame is that what we want to convey is that a typical user who knows how to use Google and Bing, if they go to Google and Bing and ask this question, they will not get the desired correct answer because these systems are not designed for this specific task. They have generic data. So, and in this experiment, we show that a person who wants to ask this question and he has no other system, access to no other system but Google and Bing, then they will receive a very poor precision and recall. But if we design a very appropriate system using specific type of data, then for the same questions, the system can help the user because it can give the answers with, let's say, 60, 70, 80% recall or precision, whatever the metric is. So in your discussion, you should claim what you are trying to say in a more precise manner, that our aim is not to show that our search method is better, but what we are trying to show is that typical methods to access information like Google or Bing, they are not designed for this specific purpose. Therefore, our system plugs this gap. We are bridging this gap. We are correcting for this difference by creating this specific system. And then we show by our experiments that a person who has this kind of information need, if they rely on systems like Google and Bing, they will not get the exact output, but using a system that we have designed, they can get it. So we are not claiming that our system is better. What we are claiming is that our system is designed specifically to meet a task which Google and Bing are not designed to.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you so much.
You have to frame it in a way that there is no scope for someone else to counter question you.
Exactly. Exactly. That's why. Sorry, can I ask one more question?
Yes, please. You can ask more than one also. No need to be sorry for that.
Thank you. Okay. So one more question, that like any species of moon is invented and add in the Wikipedia, suppose. And I want that it is automatically added in the my knowledge graph. So is there any way that I can link with the Wikipedia to my system, to my knowledge graph, and when there any new information is adding, there will be some alert or something I can automatically do in my knowledge graph?
So I don't think there is a existing system, but you can write it yourself. I mean, if there is a wiki page for Moong, right? So in Wikipedia, I think if you can, I'm not sure, but I think you can. You may have to check it. You can subscribe to updates, right? Anytime someone makes a edit to Wikipedia, you can get a notification. Or what you can do is, just write a simple cron job or some other type of scheduled job, which after every 1 week or whatever time period is suitable for you, goes to Wikipedia, crawls the page for Moong Dal and compares it with the previous version. And in case there is a change, then it can do that.
So it's a kind of manual. Can we say?
Not manual. You can write code to do that, right? You can write a script that after every week pings Wikipedia,
All right.
gets the text, gets the HTML text, processes it, and does it, right? That's how you can do it.
Yes, sir. Yes, please complete. Sorry.
I was just saying that I think that's the easiest way. I am not sure if there is any service that can tell you what has changed, what has not changed, because I mean, it's a very specific requirement which possibly some researchers will have. So I don't think there is a tool, but it is actually relatively, it should be relatively simple to write a job like this. Like after every week, just ping Wikipedia this specific page, crawl
Okay.
the HTML page and compare it with the previous version to see if there is something that has
And-
changed or not.
And do you think Wikipedia category graph can help in this?
Not knowing the details of the problem and not knowing your specific knowledge base or the type of information you are collecting, it is very hard for me to say. But in general, the answer is yes, the Wikipedia category should be helpful. But again, it depends whether you are looking for more fine-grained information than what is in Wikipedia, or you are okay with the categorization they have done. So it all matters in the detail. At a high level, it should help. I mean, any additional information might be useful. So yes, it is worth exploring. But whether it is helping or not, it will depend on the details of the problem. At what detail you want to look into it, what are your categories, is there alignment or not?
Thank you. Thank you so much. Actually, the
Sure.
main motive was asking about the comparison about the Google
Sure.
Bing and my application. Thank you so much.
Sure. Sure. Any further questions, either through chat box? Okay, so yeah, I think we can proceed if there are no questions. So okay, so finally, I want to conclude with a brief description of another problem relevant to knowledge graphs, is that finding evidence of knowledge graph facts. So typically it's a problem that I heard from a lot of users, a lot of our clients, that it's okay, you can show us these graphs, you can show us these triples, you are using reasoning based on it, you are finding answers, but can you come up with a system which is more easier for our users to appreciate or understand or trust the results that you are showing? So this is one thing that they typically have requested a lot of times, and the motivation for it will become clear from this example. So if you go to Google and type, let's say, any query, in this example, I have typed Janaki Ammal. So Janaki Ammal is an Indian botanist. She's, I think, first female Indian botanist, very accomplished. So something like that. So if you go to Google and search for something, what Google does it shows you the websites, right? And it also shows you these sentences, right? So these sentences are very helpful for you to understand what is the content in this website, what is this website talking about from my query. So this gives you an idea of what is going to be in the website, and it helps you understand, why this result was shown. So our intuition was very similar, right? So imagine you are a medical doctor or you are a medical researcher, and the knowledge graph system shows you this typical uh, triple, that P21 binds to CDK2. So you may or may not be aware of what P21 is, what CDK2 is. And even if you are aware, as a medical professional, as a researcher, you want to be doubly sure that you are using this fact in your analysis and this fact is actually correct. So what these doctors and these medical researchers want is some kind of an evidence. So if we show them, sorry. So if we show them this evidence that, P21 is a potent cyclin-dependent kinase, the P21 protein binds to blah, 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 basically some kind of a textual description of this triple, then it helps them to understand what exactly this triple is, why the system is showing me, and I also get some more details to understand this better. So it helps them in their research, and in many domains like finance and healthcare, this is very important because you want to be doubly sure of any decision that you want to make. Any error they make, it will have huge cost In medical domain, it can cost even someone's life too. So people actually there want to be doubly sure, and hence they had this request that don't just show us these triples, but show some additional advantage, some additional examples too, additional information. So this was our motivation, that given a knowledge graph triple, how can we find some textual description and offer it to the end users? Once you do that, it will be helpful in doing exploratory research. You could explore better. People will have more trust and confidence in the system. And as I've showed that it is useful in healthcare, finance, and a lot of other a lot of other domains. And typically when you are not sure of something, having this additional information, it actually helps in decision making. And okay, so how do we do it? Again, a very straightforward, very simple method. We just make one simple assumption. We assume that there is a background text corpus that is available to us. So this is our text corpus. In our example, we have chosen Wikipedia. So we have the whole corpus of Wikipedia available to us, and we want to find evidences from it. So what we do is, from this corpus of Wikipedia, we say that we extract individual sentences or paragraph, which we call as passage, from this corpus. So from complete Wikipedia, from each document, we extracted individual passages. So passages here are 3 sentences, and we repeat it for all the documents. So it gives us a large number of individual passages. And these passages are 3 sentence overlapping window. And then we say that given this passage sentence, our task is that if we want to show someone a relevant, if you show someone a triple, we also want to show the user one of these passages. So these passages are the ones that contain information about this triple. So the key problem now is identifying out of these millions of passages, which are the passages that contain information about this triple and can explain this triple better. So this is the problem, and we frame it in a probabilistic fashion that given the relationship R, what is the probability of individual passage P? So P is basically for all the passages here. And you can actually apply some Bayes theorem here and break it down into these components. Remember that a relationship consists of 3 parts: source entity, target entity, and the relationship. So once you apply Bayes theorem here, you can break it down here into these 2 components. One is basically the entity probability and the relationship probability. So the first 2 terms, probability of source entity given the passage and target entity given the passage, and then the relationship given the passage. So basically what we do is, for each individual passage, we compute a score that what is the probability that the entity P21 was talked about this in passage, what is the probability that entity CDK2 was talked about in the passage, and what is the probability that the relationship binds to was being talked about in the passage. So in a passage where all these 3 things were talked about with high probability, that becomes our source of explanation for this triple. So you can further simplify it into this format. I'm not going into the details. You can actually refer the paper if you are interested. But essentially what it is showing is, it is essentially a unigram language model where it is you are computing the scores of individual words of these entities and relationships from this passage. So this P, W given P, is the key component that we want to estimate. Now, it is not a straightforward task because passages are small, so they don't have enough evidences to compute these probabilities. So what typically happens is that terms that are explicitly present, they'll get a very high bias, and terms that are absent, they'll get a very zero, they'll get 0 probabilities, which is what we don't want. So for this solution, we used a smooth mixture model for probability estimation, and that's how the formulation looks like. So here, the probability of getting the score for this word from this passage is broken down as a mixture model of these 3 types of evidences: passage level evidence, document level evidence, and collection level evidence. So passage level means what is the probability of this specific word I can get from the passage. Document means what is the probability from the document from which the passage is generated. And collection is basically your global information, global weights. The advantage of a mixture model in this way is that it helps us overcome data sparsity. So if the evidence from passage is very low, you can still get some evidence from the document. And even if the document level evidence is low, you will still get some evidence from the collection. From collection, it has to be there because you are considering the global information. So it helps overcome data sparsity. And then what it does is that passages from those documents that are mainly about source and target entities, they get a boost. Uh, what why they get a boost is because let's say there is an entity called Obama. So the passage will get a high score if the passage talks about it. But if the passage is from the document of Barack Obama, then the document level evidence will also be very high, right? So it actually helps in some indirect co-reference resolution as well. For example, if let's say the keyword here is Obama, and there are two documents. One is about Donald Trump and one is about Barack Obama. So in Donald Trump's page, you will also get some passage level evidence. There is some passage about Barack Obama, and in Barack Obama's page, you will also get some passage level evidence. But what will be the differentiating factor is that the passage from document or the Wikipedia page about Barack Obama, that will be given a very high weight. And it actually helps in co-reference resolution as well indirectly, because in Barack Obama's page, most of the occurrences of Obama will be about Barack Obama as well, but not some other Obamas, right? So that's the advantages. So it's a very simple model, and we wanted to see how well it works. So for this, we created our own data set because it was a new task. We could not find any standard paper using this or any data set using this. So we created our own data set to evaluate. So we used Wikipedia as our corpus, and from Wikipedia's top 25 most viewed pages, we used basically a set of 25 query entities. So those entities and their relationship. So this was done so that people don't say that how did you select your entities. We just say that these are the top 25 most viewed pages. So these are the things people are mostly interested in. So we use them as our queries because this is something people are most interested in. So this is our source, this is our triples. And then for baselines, we use some standard passage retrieval based models, which are called as inference networks. So these were variations of the inference networks models. And for doing relevance judgment, we hired 5 students and they did a user study. So each person was shown for each triple, they were shown multiple passages and they had to provide their relevant judgments that whether the passage that is being shown to them, is it useful, is it slightly useful, or is it not at all useful. So they had to do this thing, and each thing was actually evaluated by multiple students so that you could do inter-annotator judgments and those type of analysis. So we did that study, and all the data that we generated, the relevance judgments provided by the users, and the implementation of the model, it is open source. It is available from my GitHub repository. So if you are working on a similar problem, you can use the same data for your papers as well. So how did the solution work? So for this, we had 50 queries and we evaluated top 5 answers by each method. And these are the results. So the standard models that we could adopt, inference networks and its variations, their precisions were 25, 16, and mean reciprocal rank was very low. But our solution worked really well, about 86% precision at 1 and 80 mean reciprocal rank, and overall precision at 5 was around 72%. So in about 86% of the queries, the first passage that was being shown, that was found useful by the users. And we also did a preference evaluation where what we did is we showed results of different systems to the user side by side. So for each query, they will be shown three results. They will be shown 2 results, method A and method B. People are not there, they are not told which is method A, which is method B. And we will also keep them shuffling so as to avoid bias, because typically what happens is that when people are completing tasks just to get over the task quickly, they will do that, they'll always say, okay, one is correct, one is correct, one is correct. So this is a common observation that is made. So we did not tell them which method is which, and we were always shuffling the methods that were being shown to them so as to account for those bias. So even in that study, we found that the 3 students, 3 evaluators. Overall, for 150 queries, 73% of the time, the solution that we had proposed that was preferred, and the baselines were preferred only 11 times. Around 36 times, both were equally useful solutions, and around 30 times, both solutions did not give a good result as expected by the users. So overall, our solution was preferred most number of times. It also failed some number of times, but overall, it had a good performance. So again, a caveat that we did this analysis and we actually got some very positive reviews from the reviewers that find that they really appreciated that we were able to highlight the cases where our system was not working well as well. Because oftentimes in papers, people ignore this aspect that your system has to have perform in every aspect and beat every other system, but that is not always the right thing. So we actually could receive very good feedback that on this fact that we analyzed weaknesses of our system and we showed that where we were not doing good. So to give you some examples, so let's say this is a triple. John Cena has the nickname the prototype. So this is the baseline. This is the passage found by the baseline systems. So if you see here that this is not even about John Cena or prototype, it is prototype of like a definition of a prototype. What is a prototype? So what was happening is that in this document, prototypes was mentioned multiple times, so it was given a very high weight. But in our solution, we actually found the document, the passage that actually said this thing. Cena wrestled under the ring name the prototype. So this is a very good result, and this was actually happening because we are also using document level evidences, so it was boosting these scores. So these were some type of examples where we were doing good, and now this is an example where we did a really bad job. So the relationship was Alan Combs, employer, Fox News. So if you read this paper, it talks about Fox News, it talks about Alan Combs, but it is not giving any natural language indication or description that actually tells the user that Alan Combs is an employee at Fox News. So that was a case where our system was failing, because what was happening is that there are references to Alan Combs, there are references to Fox News, there are discussions about employee. It's just that these things are not being discussed in context of the entities that are of interest. So this passage was not describing the relationship. So that was a method to find evidences for facts that you have in the knowledge bases. So yeah, so with this, we come to an end of this session. In the 2 sessions, basically, if you have noticed, I did not want to go into very technical, technical details, but not into those things that, this is the state of the art, this is the best method. What I wanted to cover is give you an high level overview of things and motivations and intuitions about different decisions we made, things that do not work in practice, and problems we face when we are building a knowledge graph. And then how do we account or correct those things? What are the things we should be aware of, that no matter what method we choose, we are bound to have noise, we are bound to have issues with our systems. So how do you take care of that? And then I wanted to have these applications, which I hear, which was developed because we were hearing it from a lot of people, that we see triples, but from an end user's point of view, triples are not very intuitive, but textual descriptions are very intuitive. So how do you come up with, or how do you find textual descriptions for triples? This was a use case which we heard again and again, and we came up with a solution for that. So again, a practical aspect I wanted to share with you all. So that's it. That's what I wanted to cover. Again, I'm happy to receive any questions and any feedback for improvements. I would really appreciate that.
From among the participants, if you wish to interact with the speaker, sir, actually it was really wonderful, because on the way also it was very, very much interactive, and you answered the cumulative queries also that were accumulated into the minds of the participants since the first day.
Yeah, happy to offer my insights. I'm always open. So if you have noticed on my slides, I'm not sure if they are still visible.
Yeah,
Are my
Twitter was there.
so my Twitter is there. So feel free to get in touch with me.
Is it S
Uh,
Bhatia underscore?
yes, yes. So feel
Yeah,
free
the
to get
slides
in.
are not visible, but it is S Bhatia underscore. I noticed it there.
Yes. So I shared it. So if you want, you can connect with me over Twitter for any questions or any discussions, or in general, if you just want to connect, I'm happy to connect and have any discussions. So always open to that.
Yeah, really wonderful. And yes, for 21st also, I'll like to have you here and we'll have a discussion over it. But for today, though, it was since morning you are speaking. That is hats off to you.
Yeah, I think I need to
Both
drink
the
something
sessions.
now.
Yeah, true. It is too long. I can see you were speaking continuously. So please, we'll not bother you anymore for today at least.
That's okay. That's okay.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Please go ahead and take some rest.
Sure. Thank you. Happy to be here, and it was a good experience. So thank you. Thank you for inviting me.
Okay, sir. Thank you so much.
Sure. Sure.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thanks. Bye bye.
For the participants, there is an announcement. I have already dropped an email for that announcement. There are three important things for certification. So here we come to an end of the technical sessions. Number one is feedback. The form I have just circulated in the chat box was the internal feedback for NIT Kurukshetra. Officially for certification, you have to put the feedback on the Atal portal through your login. That is point number one. Point number two is for attendance. Please do not worry. We will take it from the WebEx platform and let you know if we really want any clarification. If you are falling short of attendance, then we will be in touch with you before uploading. If the attendance is okay, then all fine. Do not worry at all. Regarding the test link will be shared with you at 2:45. The timing will start at sharp 2:45. It will be a 50-minute exam. It will be objective type question paper, 50 minutes, 50 marks. That's it. Exactly 2:45 it will start, and please try to submit before time so that you do not have any hassles later on. So let us join back at 2:40 or 2:35 probably, and at 2:45 sharp we will start the exam. These are the three major components for the certification. And post test we will be having a valedictory session of the institute. All the participants, please be there in the valedictory. You had been such a wonderful audience for this FDP. All the 14 sessions you did dedicatedly, I should say. So please be there for 30 minutes in the valedictory session so that the other faculty and staff of the institute, the head of the institute, director sir, and the head of the department also could look into how you people have interacted, and you people will also get a slot to speak upon the feedback there also. So thank you so much. Let us join back at 2:35. Bye-bye for now. There is no passing criteria, dear. Let us see. Actually, from Atal, there is a passing criteria of 60%. But always in class, if all of you are teachers, some of you are teachers also. So you people could devise your own criteria at sometimes also. So below 60, more than 60%, it will never go. But yes, a bit flexible we can be always. So try to do your best and leave the rest to me. Thank you for now.